The 2024 NBA draft is right around the corner, and there's still hope the Warriors could get a quality player with the 52nd overall pick. Harrison Ingram out of UNC, a name recently linked to the Warriors. I talked to an expert to find out why you should be excited if they do select him. That's coming up now on Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Thanks so much for being here. I'm your host, Kylen Mills, a play-by-play broadcaster and host for NBC Sports Bay Area, the Big Ten Network, and many more. I do have a special guest joining me in just a few for a recorded interview on today's show. We are diving into NBA draft projections. New mock drafts are coming out with a couple of different players the Warriors could select. We're going to talk about some of them, but mainly Harrison Ingram out of UNC, a forward who's been compared to Draymond Green without all of the off-court antics, so don't panic, folks. But I talked to an expert who's very familiar with Ingram, covered UNC all of last season to find out exactly what he could bring to the Golden State Warriors. Sports Talk Radio host Josh Graham spoke with me earlier this week in a recorded interview. He hosts The Drive with Josh Graham out in North Carolina. So without further ado, here he is with some insight on Harrison Ingram. Josh, great to connect. Excited to talk about a possible draft pick for the Warriors. How's it going?
Man, goodness, it's this time of year where the finals wrap up and then you kind of look at your watch and you're like, wait, we have a week and a half until the draft arrives. And as somebody who's in the heart of college basketball country, it's certainly something that we have all our eyes on next week.
Very exciting. And you covered the North Carolina Tarheels, and a prospect who could and should be drafted coming up next week is forward Harrison Ingram. Now, Bleacher Report just released a brand new mock draft this week, and it has the Warriors picking up Ingram at 52nd. 21 years old, played 3 seasons in college for people who are unfamiliar and are listening or watching. 2 of them at Stanford. Last year played at UNC, was a third-team All-ACC selection. Played well at the NBA Draft Combine from what I've seen and what I've heard and some of the specs that came out of there. Very surprised to see him drop down because initially I saw the projections more in the 30s. Do you have any idea why we could see Ingram fall to 52?
It's weird because you're right. At the Combine, he tested very well. It's not one of those deals where he's listed a certain height and weight in college and then mysteriously loses a couple of inches and, you know, it's not exactly the build that you want. And given where today's NBA is at, you'd think that a player with the basketball IQ of Harrison Ingram for a team last year that was reeling off missing the NCAA tournament in 2023, and really he was the one big addition from 2 seasons ago to last year, going to be a top 4 team going into the tournament, a national seed, that's a first-round draft pick and a draft that many people think is a down draft for most year standards. So that did surprise me to see that they fell or that they see him falling as far as to the 50s. But if Harrison Ingram nets getting to be at Golden State, given how good of a fit in many ways it would seem a good marriage between the Warriors and Harrison Ingram to be, then I think he's probably a very happy man.
Okay, well, you mentioned the buzzwords, good fit, and I'm very curious to hear why you say that. Want to give a little bit more context to folks who are just being introduced to Harrison Ingram. So North Carolina is where he played last. Shooting guard, small forward, swingman. I'm not entirely sure what the fit would be in the NBA, but played forward position in college. I saw him listed at 6'7" on UNC's website, and some of the other draft boards I saw him listed as 6'5", so I don't know if that's maybe without shoes, right around 230, 235. So not entirely positive on what the exact is for the hikes. I've seen a couple different numbers, but again, 21 years old, played 3 seasons in college. Stats from last season, more than 12 points per game, nearly 9 boards, more than 2 assists, nearly 1.5 steals. And the high basketball IQ is a big thing that stands out in reading any type of analysis on his game and in watching him play. You said you think he could be a great fit for the Warriors. So why is it that you believe this could be a great marriage?
Harrison Ingram, he's the closest thing, Kylen, we've seen to Draymond Green coming out of college.
I was waiting for this. Yes.
It's eerie. It's eerie how close it is on paper. At Michigan State, Draymond Green was listed at 6'7", 230 pounds. Harrison Ingram is 6'7", 225. Draymond was, as a career at Michigan State, 10.5 points, 7.6 boards, 2.9 assists, 36% from three. Harrison, 11.1 points, 7.2 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 35% from three. And we know basketball is not played on paper. Okay, fine. Same measurables, similar stats. We need more than that. The thing that most compares Draymond Green to a guy like Harrison Ingram is the description of he doesn't need to be the best player on the floor. RJ Davis was the ACC Player of the Year and the best three-point shooter in all of college basketball for a lot of the season. And he's completely cool with that. Whatever the role is, he's deemed to be the heart of the team. And we can't count how many times that's been the label for Draymond over the last decade. Oh, he might not be the best player, but he's the heart and soul of the Warriors when they were at their peak. That was Harrison Ingram last year. Again, the one big addition from a team that missed the tournament to being a top 5 team in college basketball. There are games where he gets asked to score 20, 25 points a game, and then the next night he's scoring 8, but grabbing 19 rebounds like he did against NC State. Like, he's that type of player that he can do so much for your team, but it's the energy that he brings and the IQ that he brings that likens him to a guy like Draymond. It's not something I say lightly.
Okay, so he definitely has the IQ, really good defensive player. My question is more about the shot making. At this point in Draymond Green's career, he's not really a threat. Now, his three-point shooting did actually come along, and he hit some open threes, the best three-point shooting of his career, in fact, this past season at nearly 40%, which is kind of crazy. But I read an article where Ingram described himself as a prototypical 3-and-D type of player and saying that's what he wants to do. He also said that he felt like the percentages you might see from his collegiate career aren't actually representative of how good of a shot maker he is. I went back and looked, and he did make a pretty big jump at UNC, shooting about 38.5% from beyond the arc. Just kind of curious from his offensive game. What did you see with the Tar Heels? Do you think that his shot making ability could translate in the NBA?
The games that most, I think, showed us the best, if you want to go back and look at highlights of Harrison Ingram at his best, it's in the state of North Carolina facing a Duke team that ended up making the Elite Eight and an NC State team that ended up making it to the Final Four. Duke, Carolina, you go to Carolina and you go to Duke to play in that rivalry. And the first time he was a part of it, he was the best player on the floor. He had 21 points, 13 rebounds in the game. And then at Cameron, he got under Kyle Filipowski's skin. There was the notable, he may have gotten tripped up by Kyle Filipowski, and then he's talking trash to the crazies right in front of me and getting a gumball thrown at him and water thrown at him. He has that kind of energy where he doesn't mind mixing it up and talking smack with Michigan State in the NCAA tournament. NC State, Carolina and NC State have been playing for over 100 years in basketball, and they have a lot of history, these two programs. Nobody in the history of that series had ever grabbed 19 rebounds in a game until Harrison Ingram did so earlier this year. So he did things within the rivalry in a short period of time, him only spending 1 year in Chapel Hill, that we hadn't really seen on Tobacco Road. And we've seen a heck of a lot of great players come through here, and Harrison Ingram adds himself to that list.
Well, Ingram, he has the ability to be a two-way player. If the shot making can come along, he's got the great defense. He's got that hustle, ability to do the dirty work when you talk about grabbing boards and those kinds of things. Now, I think the comparisons to Draymond Green could scare some folks off for Warriors fans, because at this point in Draymond Green's tenure, there are some people who are a little bit exhausted with the antics, because Green goes from that level of being the heart and soul of the team, of being the firepower, to doing too much. And you saw this past season, the suspensions really hurt the Warriors as a team. So I want to hear more about Ingram as a person, as a player, as a competitor. From what you've seen, how does he carry himself? How does he handle those adverse situations when he doesn't like the calls that he's getting? How would you describe the way that he handles himself on and off the court?
I'm glad you frame it that way, Kylen, because we're just talking about it from a basketball perspective. And obviously with Draymond, it's not just basketball. It's a lot of stuff that happens off the floor. And Harrison had no issues with that. Harrison is somebody that is not just basketball smart, basketball IQ. He's book smart. He did very well, one of the smartest players on the Stanford basketball team for a couple of years. And he's the guy that North Carolina, when they have a difficult loss, he's the first guy who's coming out to talk to the media, and he handles himself so well. He's the guy that you seek out for insight for what happens in these games. And it's rare that you find that at the collegiate level, someone who's very good at communicating in a consumable way what exactly is transpiring out there. The antics, there's really, other than him getting tripped up by Kyle Filipowski, there really wasn't anything of that sort. And in the Michigan State game, where he noted that there was a lot of trash talk in the tournament, he wasn't doing a lot of the chirping back, but he certainly attracted all of it with his physical play. And that's usually what warrants those who are more interested in mixing it up doing just that.
If you're anxiously waiting for NBA season to arrive for the Warriors to resume, you can pass the time by watching the WNBA or MLB in the offseason. The Olympics right around the corner too. And one way you can make watching those games a lot more fun is by playing PrizePicks. You can win money. What more do you got to ask? With PrizePicks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 players' stat projections, and you're locked in. Here's an example from the WNBA. Will Fever guard Caitlin Clark score more or less than 18 points? Will Fever center Aaliyah Boston grab more or less than 9 rebounds? Will Las Vegas Aces superstar Asia Wilson score more or less than 27.5 points? You can make picks on all 3 of those and lock in your lineup. It's that easy. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. One skill of his that I want to talk about before I let you go is the playmaking ability. I do think that's something that's underrated. And once again, in watching some of his highlights, I think you can see the high basketball IQ on display offensively, making the right plays at the right time, a pretty good passer, which also you could make a comparison to a Draymond Green, who often runs the Warriors offense, even as a point forward, as people put it. How would you rate his playmaking and passing ability? Passing
ability is really high, and it has to be if you're at times playing at the 4 and you're doing so at 6'7". And that's not the concern. The offensive concern that you might have with him, he's also a really good transition player, by the way, when it comes to running the secondary break at Carolina, getting to the rim. He checks that box.
Love it.
If you're trying to get a basket and him in a half-court set beat you off the dribble, that's not exactly the type of game he's developed yet. But the three-point shooting this past year, you noted it. It was around 39% for a lot of the year. It was closer to 40% at one point. It was a little bit over 40%. That is heading in the right direction, and what you want to see and what we're talking about when we say that this is a guy who can fit in today's NBA. The playmaking of beating guys off the dribble in a half-court set, he's not at that level of playmaking, but the tools are there to maybe develop into something of that sort. And another thing that a lot of the scouts that I talk to like about Ingram is how refined he is at 21 years old. It reminds me of Cam Johnson a few years ago, where people said, oh, this is not a guy you can take in round 1 because, he's 21, 22 years old. Well, some people like the fact that they know exactly kind of what they're getting in a player when you bring it in, especially if it's a veteran team like Golden State has. Let's pick this guy because there's less ambiguity with what this guy is going to be in a few years. This guy's a little bit more polished and knows, and we know what he's going to bring us in the first year that he's here, or at least the first couple.
That's one thing that I think gets so harped on in not just NBA drafts, but NFL drafts, is like the potential, picking the young player, the most athleticism. But I do think it gets overlooked, having maturity, having game awareness, and then having that experience at the collegiate level. The Warriors just last year, late 50s, picked up a Trace Jackson Davis, who came in and had an awesome rookie campaign. He was upset he didn't make the all-rookie team, and I think he had a strong case to do so. Averaged right around 8 boards per game. I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 8 points, and then right around 4 or 5 rebounds. But he came in more polished. And I think that there is something to be said for that in bringing in a young player who you know what you're getting, as you just pointed out. So I think those are all ringing endorsements. Last one for you, because you sent me a couple of great clips that showed Harrison Ingram's personality, one or two, or just a favorite moment or memory from some of his conversations with the media.
Yeah, it's after the Duke game at Cameron where he's cracking jokes about his teammates. There was a guy named Cormac Ryan who scored 31 points. Another guy who used to play at Stanford, by the way, had 31 at Cameron, and he's 25 years old because of the COVID year. And he said that he almost had as many points as his age is. And he was the guy that helped facilitate a lot of the good flavor, the type of stuff that you want to see teammates liking each other and being around each other. And everybody loved being around Harrison Ingram. So after that Duke game where he's mixing it up with the Cameron crazies and having a little bit of fun afterwards, that's what stands out to me. But also it's worth noting, if we're going to complete the Draymond comparison for real, it's kind of a shock that Draymond fell into round 2 when he was drafted after losing fittingly to North Carolina in that national championship game his last year in 2009. If Harrison Ingram falls into round 2, whether it's the Warriors or somebody else, maybe that team benefits.
That's one thing about any draft class is you can still find quality players, and sometimes quality players do fall farther in the draft, and then they go on to be a defensive player of the year. Like Draymond Green, the Warriors have done a good job of sniffing out or finding some diamonds in the rough here throughout the last 10 years. So we'll see. Could Harrison Ingram be the pick, and could he be that diamond in the rough? I would love to see it. Let's bring in the new Draymond, hopefully without all of the antics. But Josh, thanks so much for hanging here. Appreciate the time. I'll let you get back to it. I know you're busy. Where can people find and listen to you?
On YouTube, just search The Drive with Josh Graham. We got video clips there. And also wherever you get your podcasts, it's an hour each day, Monday through Friday. You could search The Drive with Josh Graham as well, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. And I'm just so glad to finally meet you, Kylen. Thanks so much for having me.
Great insight there from Josh. Appreciate him joining the show. Want to go through a couple other draft picks who could be available when the Warriors go to make the 52nd overall selection. Another name that came up when I spoke to 247 Sports' Isaac Trotter late last week, you can go ahead and look up that episode, was Washington State's Jalen Wells. Bleacher Report's latest mock draft has him going 50th overall, 6'7", 206, small forward. Scouts are picturing him as a shot-making specialist with wing size, outstanding spot-up and pull-up abilities. He's a name to keep an eye on. Another one, Kentucky shooting guard Antonio Reeves, talked about him in that last episode as well. 6'5", 187, 23 years old. Both those last two players, a little bit older prospects. One of the best perimeter shooters in the class. Great three-point shooter, can hit the catch and shoot and the pull-up fairly well. Also, not the best defender, and he may have some athletic limitations. Reeves might. But for a Warriors team that could be watching Klay Thompson go out the door, bringing in a great shooter is not a bad option to have someone who can help space the floor coming in off the bench and a young player who can grow into that role. Not saying either of these two would be potential starters at the 2 spot, but still good to have a shot maker coming in off the bench. This last season, the second unit really didn't have a major or clear floor spacer. So that is an issue that could be addressed with a youngster coming in where they would have some opportunities. Another name that has come up right around when the Warriors would be making their pick. In fact, ESPN had the Warriors taking this player, and that's USC guard Bronny James. Yeah, LeBron James' son. I sigh when talking about this pick because, you know, the storylines are endless with this one. I will give you some of the specifics about his game. Projected based on this latest Bleacher Report mock draft to go 55th, so a little bit after the Warriors pick. And there is some speculation that really only the Lakers would take him and that teams around him aren't maybe as high on Bronny James, but supposedly his NBA draft combine did raise his stock. Now, shooting guard out of USC, just 19 years old, played his freshman season, 6'2", 210, definitely on the smaller side. Looking at his stats from this last year, just on paper, surprising to see him in the draft, averaging 4.8 points per game, 2.8 rebounds, 2.1 assists, shooting 36.6% from the field and 26.7% from three-point range. Certainly not the efficiency you're looking for from a shooting guard and one who expects to make it at the next level in the NBA. Oh, and by the way, he shot 67.5% from the free throw line. So I still think it remains to be seen if he gets drafted by a team other than the Lakers. He could still be available or should still be available when the Warriors do come around to make their pick. Apparently, though, James did impress with his shooting at the NBA Combine. He has defensive quickness that was shown off during his time at USC. I think he's definitely a player that if he did get drafted, would have to spend a ton of time in the G League with whatever organization he's in. Could potentially have shot-making abilities. He does have foot speed. One thing that's been on a lot of the scouting reports about James is he does have the IQ to create, and he could be a possible 3-and-D type of player, or at least have that path. Still, 6'2" to me seems small. So his draft stock potential has been largely debated. Obviously, you have the storyline. LeBron James' son is the only reason he's on any of these draft boards because of who his dad is. I'll let you answer that question, but I would say the Warriors should pass on Bronny James. I don't feel confident about that being the right pick for the Warriors right now. So that's where I stand on some of the other selections. We're going to continue to dive into the draft picks throughout the next couple of days, and as we get closer to the NBA draft coming up late next week. Finding qualified candidates can be so hard for small business owners. On the other side, for job seekers, it can also be hard to find the right role and the right fit for them. The perfect place to make those connections between the two is LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. That's right, for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates as well. So easy that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that that's why they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker than it already was. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Final piece of news to get to here on this edition of Locked On Warriors, and that's the news that came out earlier this week that Gary Payton II will be returning to the Golden State Warriors. He did choose the player option that was available to him for $9.1 million. I love GP2. I have been the biggest fan of GP2. His backstory and how he made it to the NBA and won an NBA championship is incredible. From the G League to offering to be on the Warriors video production staff after getting cut from the team to earning a role and then a huge role in an NBA title winning team is one of the best stories in the NBA in the last several years. I stand by that. However, I'm sighing again too many times in this episode. GP2 opted into $9.1 million for a player who has not been healthy since that 2022 title run. Last season, Payton played in 44 games, dealt with a multitude of injuries. In fact, going back to when the Warriors reacquired him from the Portland Trailblazers, Gary Payton II has only been available for 66 of 124 possible games, which is not a good sign. And then back with the Portland Trailblazers in 2022-23, he only played in 15 games. Once again, struggling with injury. He dealt with an ab injury or adductor injury, I believe it was, which kept him out for a lengthy period of time. This season, again, had to miss a ton of time with a multitude of injuries. So you're talking about now playing a player and having a player on this roster who may not be available. Like, I love Gary Payton II. This Warriors team needs help with perimeter defending. That is a huge issue. But in order for GP2 to help, he has to be healthy, and they need someone they can rely on consistently to be that lockdown defender that this team is desperately needing and missing right now, especially with the regression of Andrew Wiggins, Klay Thompson not being the defender that he once was. Like, who do the Warriors have to really lock up the best player in opposing teams? They have Draymond Green, who's a great defender, but in terms of anyone in the backcourt or a guard, they don't have someone right now with Gary Payton II's profile, which is why I like him. But if he's not on the floor, that doesn't do the Warriors a whole lot of good. Now, opting in does give Payton flexibility to extend with the Warriors instead of becoming a free agent. He did indicate at his final press conference after the season came to a close that he wants to stay with the Warriors even longer than this just single-year player option. but opting in does give him some time to possibly negotiate and work that out. And with his injury history, like, he's not going to get more going elsewhere, I think, at this point. So it made sense for him. But now for the team, how do you deal with GP2 moving forward? I do think Gary Payton II could be someone you look to move in a trade. The Warriors need help. They need to bring in, I think, a big, whether it be a traditional center and banger or someone who is more of a floor spacer, whether that's a 4 or 5, whatever that looks like, someone who can also hit the long range shots. I also think they need a consistent secondary scorer, whether that is their big or those two one and the same, or do they bring in someone else to the backcourt? I think they need to make some key additions, and Gary Payton II could be a piece that you move just because of the injury concern. I think he brings great energy, great chemistry, love the bench energy, and I missed that. It was better this past season, but in 2022-23, it was sorely missed compared to the championship run. Just that special chemistry and fun and joy that the bench brought to every game during the title run. Damian Lee was a big part of that. Juan Toscano-Anderson was a big part of that. Gary Payton II was a part of that. And those three leaving, I do think, left a void in this team, just in some of that special culture and the quality that each of them brought personality-wise. Now, you can't have personality players on the roster. Like, don't get me wrong. I understand the business decisions, but I love having Gary Payton on this team, Gary Payton II on this team for that reason. But if he's not realistically available, consistent enough, is he really helping the Warriors? They can't have him in and out of the lineup or playing 44 games. So the big question mark, is GP2 able to get healthy and consistently be healthy? That remains to be seen. Could he be a piece that you move in a trade? I would be okay with it just because of all those injury concerns. In the games Gary Payton has played, averaging 5.5 points per game, 56.3% shooting. But I just don't think we saw him get to the level that he was during that title run because of how inconsistently he was playing and how much he was dealing with injuries. Has the ability to be elite in transition. That incredible athleticism, plays so much bigger than his size. Gary Payton II, in addition to being a lockdown defender, can provide a spark on offense in certain moments. During that title run, like, randomly would hit a key 3, randomly would have an incredible dunk, typically out in transition, but sometimes in traffic. It just was really fun to watch what he was able to do on both ends of the floor. Happy to see him stay with the Golden State Warriors, but I do think he has to get healthy to be a valuable member of this roster. And if not, then it is time to look at possibly moving on from Gary Payton II. Wish him well, love him, and once again, think he has done incredible things for this organization. It made sense for him to pick up that player option at $9.1 million. Does it make sense for the Warriors to move forward with Gary Payton II as a part of this roster? He has to get healthy. That's the biggest concern right now. Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of Locked On Warriors. As we creep closer to the NBA draft, I'll be continuing to break down different players, bringing in experts who covered that player at the collegiate level or internationally. I have another expert coming on from within the Locked On Network who covers college basketball as a whole to grade this draft class, what some of the strengths and weaknesses are, and what realistically the Warriors could be looking at and looking for with the 52nd overall pick. So be sure to stick with us here on Locked On Warriors. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thanks so much for hanging. Appreciate you stopping by, and we will see you next time.